I'm here with Jeffrey Williams. What I want to find is the reason and the fix for feeling stressed. Okay. I want Jeffrey to share his wisdom. All of us deal with stress on a daily basis, as we know, especially after holidays. This is holidays of 2024, based on and when you watch this actual video or listen to the podcast. All of us deal with stress on a daily basis. It's going to affect our physical and emotional health. Jeffrey Williams has helped 10,000 plus clients over the last 20 years reset their mindset to become people with a high quality of mental and physical health. Let's understand his wide range of teachings that help people reach their human potential. All right, my friends. Jeffrey, introduce yourself, my friend. So tell me what you're all about.
Well, man, you just did a cool little summary. Thank you for that.
You're
For
welcome.
me, and you mentioned stress, I find stress is at the core, at a causal level for all dis-ease, whether, like you said, that is physical, mental, social, or cosmological disease. What I find is that if we don't have balance in our autonomics, then we're not going to have balance or vitality and wellness in the rest of our life. So at my work, I focus on measurably finding out if someone's either in balance or out of balance in their autonomics, in their brain, and then work to bring about a state of balance that is measurable, that then we can track and find out how their nervous system is learning to adapt to the stress in their life. Because as you know, and you just said, there's like stress is rampant, right? It's everywhere. We're not going to be able to remove all the stressors. But what we can do is help people to better adapt to the stress that's in our life and recognize what is truly life threatening and be able to discern those from the bills and the bosses and the traffic, which actually aren't threatening our life, but often put us into that sympathetic dominant, out of balance in our autonomics, so that we're not able to rest and digest and grow and repair in the way that we're designed to.
And explain to you, because this is exactly what I tell my patients, is my job, a healthcare professional's job, is to help you deal with the stress of your day. So it
Yep.
doesn't affect you physically, mentally, psychologically. Explain the autonomic system and what is that for someone that has never heard that word before.
Yeah, that's awesome. Perfect place to start. So our brain and nervous system have what's called in the autonomic nervous system. And part of that system is it's in two branches. So you have
Mhm.
sympathetic and parasympathetic. And the way those are supposed to work is kind of like a teeter-totter. And so what happens is you'll typically go into more sympathetic during the day. So that teeter-totter, imagine sympathetic increasing during the daylight hours when you're active and engaged and doing life. And then at night, it's supposed to switch. Sympathetic slows down and parasympathetic picks up. And so we get to rest and digest, eliminate all the waste we created during the day, catch up on all that growth and repair. So what happens is that stress impacts our autonomics, because if I am facing a threat, if I'm facing something that's of imminent danger, imagine we're still hunter-gatherer bodies dropped into modern sedentary times. So these bodies are meant to move. We've been outside our whole lives, and now we're all in boxes and checking out screens, and we have all these pressure of finances and all that other stuff. So if we get triggered into a response, which we could easily call fight or flight,
Exactly.
same kind of response that if I were picking berries down at the river and a bear showed up, I love that response. I love that heightened sympathetic, because it takes my blood flow, glucose and oxygen, moves it to my limbs. My brain lateralizes into one side so that I can have more tension to fight or protect or run. Gets, like I said, out to my limbs. The limbic system with the amygdala starts to run our perception and that back part of our brain. And it's really good for getting out of a dangerous situation. The problem is,
It's almost a great defense mechanism, right? If it works well.
exactly. And survival. We all want to survive. It's innate. It's inside of each of us that we want to survive. So what happens is this older part of our brain can move bigger neurons faster. It can override the more subtle human levels of function. And we become a little bit more animalistic, and we can save our own lives. So since survival is such a high priority, when that part of our brain, the sympathetic part, takes over, it's more outer reactive. It does a great job of keeping us safe. But at the same time, it's pulling that blood flow, glucose and oxygen innervation from our vital organs, from that parasympathetic side of our system. So the longer we're in it, the more symptomatically we're going to show up. So we're going to have stuff show up in our lives that are trying to say, hey, we got to resolve this, because if we stay in this system, just sympathetic, the acidic waste is going to build up. The processes we're going to get behind on. We're not digesting very well. Our immune system isn't working well. Our tissue repair isn't working well, because the brain's saying we're allocating resources to survive right now. And that's going to override all those other functions. And so in my work, I work to, and it sounds like you do as well, to really work with the brain and nervous system and the spine to get people back into balance so that their body feels like, okay, whatever that was, that's done now. And I can finally rest and I can start the repair on my body and get caught up.
It's almost that stress response is supposed to be short-term only. When we have stress every day of our lives, when we get in the morning till we go to bed, even when we're sleeping too, it wears itself out, correct?
Absolutely. I call it beta chemistry. And so when you're in, we want to be in alpha chemistry. So alpha chemistry is like when we have autonomic balance, so between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, we idle like your car's engine. We idle in what's called alpha waves, right above theta. We're in this state where we're like relaxed and content, but we're aware and awake and alert. Whereas when we speed up to respond to something or react to something outside of us, we go into beta. And those beta waves, Western society and science has kind of normalized those, because in science, one of the things that can be a limiter is that they'll take a huge sampling. I say, here's 100,000 people, and look, everyone's in beta, so that's normal. I disagree with it.
It's not normal.
Right. It's average, but not normal. But it's so easy, right? Like you see it all the time. We're like average and normal, they get overlaid. And that's not necessarily true or good for us. And so, that's a big piece, is just helping people recognize that having this balance and having ourselves idling in alpha, where both hemispheres, they both provide two distinct lenses on life. And to live integrated and to live vitally and to be able to like hold your center, right? If you imagine like a top that is spinning, and if you look down on that top and you see half of it's black, half of it's white, if you're spin that top and you're able to stay really centered, the black and the white, what happens? They become a gray, a neutral tone in which you can integrate, or you can accept the upside and the downside. Say the black and the white represents two halves of a situation. When you're centered, you can hold both of those without falling off. But if you tend towards being in your limbic system in the amygdala, the downside of that fight or flight response is that it's playing predator-prey games. So it wants to get away from the pain and towards the pleasure, right? Away from the predator and towards the prey. So the part of our brain that takes over starts to favor one side, and that top is wobbling. And so how many of you out there and how many of your patients have you seen that oscillate between like, oh, life's so bad, life's so good, life's so bad, life's so good, right? That's a part of being in that level of function in your brain. And when you move out of that and you start to come into the prefrontal cortex and you start to use your neocortex, your human mind, you're able to hold both sides or all sides of every situation and stay centered.
You almost see things as they are, not as they can be in a worse condition. It's almost being I want to call the optimist versus the pessimist. Hey, let's look at the whole picture versus when I'm under stress or that alert response is always there, my perception may not be always right. How would someone know if, for example, your first interview with somebody, that they're in the limbic, the stress response, the sympathetic response state? How would you know?
I'm going to pull up a little graphic that just happens to be right in front of me. But so measurably, what happens is if, like I mentioned, whenever you go into sympathetic, so that half of the autonomic system, it's going to lateralize brain function, meaning that one hemisphere is going to become dominant. Exactly. And so when someone comes in, we do a series of testing and they lay down on the table. And what that means, so if I go into my left brain, left brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa, right controls the left. If I go into my left, I'm going to see excessive tension on the right side of my body and the right side of the spine. So in the neck, if I'm palpating, I'm going to feel, wow, there's more tension most likely for most folks in the right side of the neck than there is the left. As I go down the spine, there's going to be more excessive tension, contracted tissue along the spine that actually shortens that side of the body. So able to see this,
I like
and
that. Yeah,
what this
I
is
like that.
describing is like
Mhm.
our goal is to get you in balance where your both hemispheres are turned on, and that means you've got tonus in the tissue all up and down the spine. Where most people go into, this is the right hemisphere, we're going to see a distortion in the
Perfect.
physical body, and then left hemisphere, it's the other way where we're going to have right side. So we
Like
have a
that.
system of metrics called the stages of balance. And so when someone comes in, I assess, are you in balance or out of balance? And then what stage of balance or imbalance are you in? And the longer you've been in it, or the more sort of stack of stressors. If you've been in a car accident and you go and a month later you get in a huge fight with your partner, there could be a secondary twist, where you have one
Mhm.
shoulder high and then the other hip high or something like that. And so what we're doing is we're measuring, not only are we measuring that distortion, we're also
Yeah,
measuring response time in each limb. So
got it.
when I test, I'm finding out like, hey, if I give you an input to your right leg and your left leg, how's the response time and the ability to meet that input? Same with your arms. And so at first, if you're like this, most of the time, right side's tense, high and tight, and you can respond. You're already in response on the right side.
Mhm.
So when I go to test kinesiologically, I'm finding out that, wow, you're already in response. And the other side, there's either no response or a big lag in your ability to respond.
That's
So
the balance, right? The balance of being too tight and then too weak. Too much.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you want, ultimately a healthy individual has tissue that's ready to do one of two things, either contract or expand and relax, right? We
Mhm.
want to be in a state of tonus so that we can do either or. When you're in a stress state, you're already in excessive tension on one side with excessive weakness opposing it. And of course, there's a zigzag of tension down the spine because the
It's
highest
almost
point
like the body has this center of gravity, but it's doing it in such a scenic route type of way
yeah.
versus just a straight path.
Yep. Yeah. And you brought up gravity, which if you start to think about the kind of, distortion
Mhm.
that out of balance does is gravity doesn't stop, right?
Nope.
So if I've got a distortion in my musculoskeletal body,
Yeah.
now gravity is accelerating degeneration in certain areas of my body because of that distortion. If I've got balance and both my hemispheres are working, my tissues in tonus, I'm at least able to meet with my own forces of levity, the forces of gravity. So I have a balance in how I'm breaking down instead of a distortion in that breakdown.
And then do you test someone's obviously they're when they're in position, do you test their motion to their movement patterns?
Yeah. So we have that you're bringing up kind of a second piece of what we do. And so the first thing is this way to reset the autonomic nervous system and bring it back into balance. And the second piece is we have a movement system called EDGU, EDGU. And if you think of the spine as the edge of you, the edge between the two halves of you,
Right.
when you move, movement is the fastest way to sculpt the brain. And so if you have movement that is rhythmic, that crosses your midline, you can sculpt a balanced brain. So what will often
Yep.
happen is that we teach a series of movements and we introduce those a little bit at a time so that a person can not only learn to maintain their brain balance and their spinal tissue. So we have really beautiful tissue like we just described before that can maintain their tonus, but also they can assess themselves. They can be like, if I do these movements and one part of it's like, that's really weird, or I can't quite turn my hand right when I go this way, it's helping reveal a little glitch in the system.
Perfect. It's almost like your body knows how to reset itself, just giving it the motion, the awareness that there's a problem.
Yeah.
That's all it comes down to. You're not like people aren't robots. So can you get their body to work and self-adjust, self-heal to where now things are more normal, more balanced, and then handle gravity like it should normally? Just people don't move enough to actually experience that. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a couple things like we mentioned. We're basically hunter gatherers that are plopped into a sedentary
Once you
society.
move.
So we have to move, right? And the
Yes.
right kind of movement is critical. And so that's why Edu does a lot of these crossing the midline. So remember how we mentioned right hemisphere controls left and right,
Yep.
left controls right. When we cross our midline with our arms and we are doing certain motions, we're creating or we're causing cross-modal communication. So the corpus callosum lights up every time I bring my right arm into my left hemisphere of my body. So in that field, what we're doing is we're creating these connections, and this movement style actually induces an alpha state as well. So we're really focused on, like I said, brain and nervous system and autonomic balance. And so figured out the right kind of movement that induces that state and help nurture and strengthen, again, that center, that ability to be the spinning top. And no matter what's going on out here, I'm still able to stay centered.
And going back to understanding someone's initial situation, we talked about the physical aspect of their imbalances for 1, 2, and resetting that. How do we understand where they are psychologically, mentally, before they start treatment with you or go through your process?
That's such a beautiful question, and it highlights this idea that I just touched on briefly, that when we're stuck in an autonomic imbalance, so especially in a sympathetic state, that limbic system takes over. And if you can imagine, and some people are probably familiar with the idea of the drama triangle, where you've got the victim, the perpetrator, and the hero or rescuer, victim, villain, people call it different things, but that triad of roles, if you assess yourself and you go, wow, where do I feel like a victim, and who do I feel like is making me a victim, and who do I wish would come help me, or what do I think could come help me? When you start to recognize that you're playing those games, that you're in a stress state. So the way you're going to psychologically perceive and process the information in your world is going to be limited by that physiological level of function. So when I'm in my limbic system, I'm pre-mammalian, reptilian at best, right? So I'm not going to be like a human. The beautiful thing about a human is it's that we are designed, we have the capacity to see objectively with our prefrontal cortex. So that means I can, like I said, hold both sides or all sides of a situation, not get stuck in polarized polarity games, which we see played out right in our politics and so many things. You go online and you can see it, right?
Yeah, that's the average, not normal. That's the average.
Exactly. And you see that out there, and it's being played out in so many ways. And the big disadvantage for us as human beings being stuck in a stress state is that we can get played by those games. Like we get caught up in them. Algorithms are set to extract our attention and get us to buy things, because when you're in that state, you're vulnerable to those sort of plays.
Just thank God for Amazon has a 30-day free return if you're a Prime member. So
Exactly.
purchase it. I don't really need that. Let me get it out of here.
Why did I do that? Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is, back to the question, how do you assess? So I do, ask them to give an honest assessment of how they think and feel and behave on a regular basis. And a lot of times that reveals a lot, because if you're really honest, with most of us tend to just, oh yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And it's like, well, what are you really spending your time doing?
Yeah, tell someone on the street that, but I'm here to help you. How can I help you if you must be honest with me?
Exactly. And when that is revealed, it's like, oh, wow, I actually am, spending way more time doing this than I say I am, or I'm not spending as much time doing this as I say I am, and I know it's good for me. And what that typically is that also reveals what someone truly values. And that's another key piece to what is the key to unlocking your vitality and your health on all levels, is understanding what you care about, what inspires you the most, what you love, because no one has to incentivize you or motivate you to do those things. Those things you're intrinsically inspired to do. You'll do them without anyone telling you to do it. So if you can reveal what that is, you'll start to recognize that there's something for each of us, something that each of us has as the highest value or the highest inspiration, the thing that's most fulfilling. And that when you assess your life and you go, well, how much am I actually doing that? And if the answer is very little, no wonder I'm uncomfortable. No wonder I'm unhealthy. No wonder I'm having symptoms, right? There's an aspect, and you know this as a chiropractor, that you can come in and you can tune up their spine, incredibly. And if they don't take the reins in their life and start to fill it with things they love, they're still not going to love their life. Like, you can tune them up all day and every day, but if they don't make the changes to interrupt the patterns that have generated the discomfort and the symptoms, then it's just going to be on repeat, right?
It's almost like you're going okay, I can help as one problem you have on the outside, but what's going on inside to make this problem keep coming back over and over again? You
Yep.
mentioned a second ago vitalism. Can you explain what vitalism is? I know it's kind of I looked a couple of things online, but what would you explain to way that you can actually change that over time?
Yeah, great question. And vitalism, it's really hard to find much on it because
Yeah.
it was a, so if you go back into the 1800s, vitalism was a key concept in the wellness world and medicine. And it's the idea that, and chiropractic is founded on a vitalistic
Mhm.
principle, which is that well, first, the power that made the body can heal the body.
There you go.
That's classic Palmer stuff there. And also that the idea is that us as practitioners cannot heal you. Our work is to get you into the most favorable circumstances so that you heal yourself. So
Boom.
vitalism believes that we are more than just a bag of physical matter. We are actually energetic beings, and that energy comes from something greater than us and moves through us, and that optimizing the structure as chiropractic does so that energy, that vital energy that moves through us, can move through us more effectively, more optimally, more fluidly, then we're going to see increases in our health, in our life expression. So we can see vitalism is vital, right? Life. That what is going on is that we're here to express life. And
Yeah.
life, we're tapped into something that is greater than the food we eat or the water we drink or the exercise we do or the thoughts we have. We're tapped into an energetic field, and that energetic field wants to move through us and ground into the earth. And so us becoming embodied and having a brain body and mind body connection gives us the ability to move those vital forces through us and sustains our life. It makes us healthier, more vital.
So I tell people once you get your system in play and in your body internally is healthy, then the workout you do will be more effective. Then what you're doing to say cope with your stress will be a lot easier for you to do. It's almost like you're giving someone the potential now, like you mentioned earlier, the human potential to have a happier life with less work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, your workout's going to work better and your recovery is going to be faster and more effective. You can
Yeah.
have, both sides of that.
And
Sleep gets deeper, digestion gets better, immune system, you find yourself, everyone gets sick around you and you're still going because you're connected to something that's vital in your life. You're realizing that, well, these are the things I love. And each of us has, unique and equally valuable
Mhm.
interests and gifts, whether it's being a chiropractor or being a mother or being a teacher or whatever it is, that's equally valuable because each of us is on a unique, soul mission here to fulfill what we feel was void, missing, or lacking in our life, especially developmentally. So it's shown that whatever we perceived, especially young, 0 to 7 is the most potent
Huge.
part, right? Where we're like hypnagogically being programmed and conditioned. Whatever we perceive to be missing, lacking, void, or violating, we naturally, imagine those were like crushing a can, we naturally have an impulse to make the can whole again. And that is the key to finding out what you love, is like you can do the math on it. If I find out that I really love teaching and helping
Yeah.
others, well, what was it that I perceived missing, lacking, void, in my own being taught or my own life experience or my own health that now makes me naturally, impulsively, instinctively want to help others and teach in a share education that draws forth that innate wholeness that's already in there in each person I meet.
You almost, even though you're doing it as a passion, say occupation, as a teacher, for example, you had mentioned, you're almost trying to fill your own hole too
Yep,
that you missed when you were a youth.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
they
phenomenal.
coincide, right? In the greatest, it's beautiful in the sense that most of the time we're told in our society in so many ways, we hear this message of like, you can't really do what you want to do. You got to do these things. You have to, you should do. Those are all injected values. Those are other people's values that are being injected and projected into your life. And when you go, well, I would love to do this, I'm inspired to do this. What's so interesting, and I find it across the board, is that people who do that actually are the most selfless, not selfish people,
Mhm.
right? They ended up being, by doing the thing that they love, they end up serving the most. They end up making the greatest impact all around them, not just for them, but it is for them too, right? It's that beautiful dance between what helps me helps others, what helps others helps me kind of situation.
You mentioned it earlier in the show too. It's finding that one thing that's your priority, that's your mission, your purpose per se.
Yeah.
When you find that, it becomes you have that feeling inside like I found it. I now want to make sure I do more and more of it because it makes you feel good, keeps you
Yeah.
in that alpha state as much as possible, but also you're helping someone else enjoy hopefully a better life too.
Exactly. Yeah. And one way to track that is when you're doing something you love, and this, I'm sure you see this all the time with your patients. It's like when you, when you're doing something you love, you embrace the challenges as much as you do the support in life. So that means like, if you think about a kid who's really into video games or something, they don't turn the video game off when a hard level comes up. Oh, I can't wait. Other than the next level, I'm going to beat this next level, right? And it's like that in life. When you're doing what you love, you will embrace that next challenge because you are willing to grow. You're going to call on greater resources. You're going to give it more time and energy and focus because you're actually inspired by it and fulfilled through it.
You almost say, okay, if for me it would be like, okay, I love Mondays. I love going to work because I don't know what's going to show up today. It's emergency Mondays we call it sometimes. It's almost like what is going to test my knowledge, my experience, expertise to help the next person.
Yeah,
And when you see them go, wow, you're right. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, that helped. You're like, boom, this is why I do it every day.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's almost it doesn't become work, becomes more exciting. It's like a game
yeah,
almost like as a kid would, as I grew up on Atari, I think.
yeah.
At that point, it's almost like how do I get to that point and continue that even a little bit of a rush because now you got someone to see their ability to get better, to improve their life at the next state.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal. And
Yep.
talking about too, how do you help someone? You talked about movement earlier too, and also I read some of your stuff about breathing. How does that get into someone's rehab or resetting themselves, or call it more getting a better default in their body and mind,
Uh,
obviously.
yeah. So just like we talked about how when you go into autonomic imbalance and the sympathetic takes over, you have
Mhm.
distortion. And if you think about the states that you're in when you're out of balance, so it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be anger, it could be
Mhm.
all those things. If you were to just watch, if you had the ability to just like have a TV screen that watched somebody as they went through all the different states they could be in, you'd
Mhm.
find that there is a breath for every state. So
Wow.
meaning that you can observe that, oh, someone's breathing like they're only taking in more and they can't let go. And that's going to produce anxiety, right? Because breath, just like there's autonomic balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, we have to have balance between our inhaling and our exhaling because inhaling represents our capacity and ability to take in what is in this moment. And our exhale represents how our capacity is to let go of what was so that we can stay present, right? Because being present is the most powerful thing we have. Our presence, and we wield that presence. We're all hungry for presence in some way or another. If you, as a practitioner, as a doctor, the more present you are with your clients or patients, they are going to feel that whether you fix something today or you don't. If you are really present, they're going to come back because they are like, whoa, this person, Dr. Tony, really just actually listened to me. He was with me today. And that is so incredibly valid and valuable. So when I look at breath and you start to help people understand that I can have greater agency to self-govern my state by knowing my breath, by
Mhm.
becoming aware of how I'm breathing in every state, and then knowing, hey, there's certain breath styles, certain breath techniques that can tone my vagus nerve, can slow my nervous system down back into parasympathetic. I can govern myself in difficult situations by taking control of my breath. So just like movement, we want to train how to move our bodies so that our brain and our spine can hold those vital energies in balance. If I learn to breathe, the more I practice, the more that becomes my natural breathing. And so that'll change your life.
And do you recommend someone who may be going into a stressful state having a breathing, if you want to call it, routine to keep their body in a less stressed state?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the one thing, and just give your audience a quick
Good
tip, that's a practical one, is slow down your exhale as much as possible. Make your exhale 2 to 3 times longer than your inhale. So if you want to start, one that we know we have a lot of science on is a vagal toning breathing, which is a 4-second inhale, 1, 2, and a 10-second exhale. So 2.5 times the length of the inhale, and then a pause for 2 seconds before starting again. So 4-second in, 10 seconds out, and pause for 2. If you do that for just 3 minutes, we have plenty of science on it that shows that your brain will down regulate out of that stress. The vagus nerve will get a little more tone instead of getting all wound up and ready for a response. And you notice your mind will change. Your mind, the perception, right, will shift. Another way to look at how the brain controls our experience and our perception is that when I'm stuck in a sympathetic dominant state, one hemisphere, it's like we talked about the black and the white, the top sides of the top. If I'm in a limbic amygdala state, I've got one eye covered, right? I can only see half the situation.
Yep.
And so when you can change your breath and you can get your brain function change, it's like taking that off so I can now see the other side. And that can go both ways, right? It can be like a lot of people spend a lot of time fantasizing about how their life, they want their life to be, or
the future.
Right. Or they're in resentment on the other end and they're like, oh, I despise if that happened to me. The first person hasn't seen the downsides of what they're projecting, and the second person hasn't seen the upsides of what their experience was. And so I think it was, a Buddha quote is that all of our suffering comes from trying to avoid the unavoidable or attain the unattainable, right? Which is an imbalanced world. Like we cannot escape that we live in a balanced world, and that we're meant to be balanced in it. And so if I'm trying to live out and have only one side, a fantasy, I'm going to suffer, right? If I'm going to avoid the other side, I'm also going to suffer, because those are unavoidable and unattainable states.
It's like that book, Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle.
Yep.
It's being in the present allows you to really, I guess, understand what's going on right now. Sometimes I'll tell myself, someone talks about, say, basketball or sports or something, I'll want to chime in. I tell myself, don't say a word, let them talk. I want to hear them, be with them. They don't want to hear my story. They're like, hey, I'm kidding Dr. Tony's office, listen to this story. No, they want to tell their story, what's going on with their life.
Exactly.
It's being that mindset of seeing yourself what you should be doing in the moment versus what have happened in the past. I like people, like, especially right now, this time of year, when I was 20 years ago, I used to be able to lift this much weight. I'm like, that's nice, but that was 20 years ago, my friend. Not today. Let's not do that again. It's something that where people, when they live in the present, the worry, the anxiety doesn't become part of their stress response all the time. I think.
Absolutely. And what happens, the more you get present and the more you have your own autonomics in balance for yourself, then what you just said is, like, you listen, and as someone who's really present, what I'm inspired to do, instead of tell my story, is ask questions. And better the question I could ask. Like, if a guy said, hey, I used to be able to lift this 20 years ago, I'd be like, how much do you think would be a reasonable amount to lift today? Basically, they already know. I believe that the wisdom and the presence inside of each person is so far beyond anything I could bring to the table, that my best approach is to ask really good questions, so that innate wisdom inside of them, that vital energy inside of them, can speak through them and reveal to them what they already know, but might be hidden behind whatever story or whatever belief is dominant in the moment.
It's a little bit of awareness for one too. Almost like I tell my patients, I try to make them their best doctor.
Yeah.
If I can do that so they can understand their body. And like you said, I'm going to post that again too, the breathing exercise, just to calm themselves down. When I get like a little upset, I feel my shoulders tighten up. I kind of know my response. I'm like, okay, that's okay. Back it off a little bit. Just take a dick. But it's almost like when you understand your own body, you know how to reset itself and now how to get out of that stress state so you become part of your normal state, which some people are in, right? When they're in chronic pain, chronic stress, and then you have to reset them in their own system. When you're with your academy, how does that work? How to talk about your program?
Yeah. So what we do is we train people to become what we call developmental alpha bioticists. And this is alpha biotics was born out of chiropractic in the 60s. There was a guy named Dr. Virgil Crane. And back in the 1920s, he had audited all the chiropractors west of the Mississippi. And his findings were, as much as we're adjusting the spine, it seems to be something above the spine that is controlling the spine. So we know that the brain controls the nerves control the fascia control the muscles and tissues, and muscles and tissues move bones. So he's like, hey, I believe in the core principles of this work, and I'm finding that I have to figure out a way to talk to the brain. So from 1922 to 1941, 19 years, he developed a system, and then he became world famous for his success with all sorts of stuff, because when people's autonomics came into balance, their body would heal, and sometimes spontaneously from really drastic things. And so in the late 40s, EEG equipment came out, and they were able to see brain waves and brain function. They go, let's see what happens. So the before and after, and they found that this one piece that we now call the alpha biotic alignment was what sent a signal into the main nerve ganglion of the sympathetic nervous system, which is on the back of the head, on the occiput on each side. And by sending a little stimulus, like a high sensory, non-threatening input signal to that part of the brain, it creates a reset, kind of like when you reset your computer. If you've had it on for days and forget to turn it off, and all your programs are working, it's like becomes less and less efficient, right? And what do? You reboot it, you get an update. The software update brings it up to the present moment, and it becomes highly efficient and more effective. So what he figured out was that's what it is. So our training program takes you from where you are right now and gives you the skills to educate and apply this technique we call alpha biotics in the world. And so it's a 10-month intensive training that brings you into certification. So we have a private academy out of Dallas, Texas, and we run programs in both Texas and California every year. We're about to start up in February another round, and it's an incredible transformational experience, really deep into neurophysiology and how our neurophysiology ultimately affects our ability to heal, our neurobehaviorology, like how it affects the way we express our life in the world. And it gives people a way to serve. It gives most of our people are people who already do something in the health field, and then they found that, wow, what I'm doing isn't quite giving me the results I want. And this piece of getting the autonomics into balance is the piece they need. Or it's someone who has found that they tried everything, and then they tried alpha biotics and were like, what? All of a sudden I feel incredibly better. I'm sleeping better. My body's healing like it's supposed to. And so those people say, well, I've been suffering for all these years. I've got to help others. And so I want to learn how to do this.
You almost go through the academy to almost find your human potential and reset your own body.
Yep.
And then you go, okay, now I want to help other people experience the same, I guess, not in mindset, just they can see their life better.
Absolutely.
Understand what it is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And takeaway for the show too, we're going to wrap it up real soon. What do you want people to know about you, your program, and also how your program helps people?
What I would love.
A lot of things, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. One is I would say that a takeaway I'd love to share is trust your body and get outside, get into nature, because that we are nature, right? And our bodies are designed to be in nature. We're all indigenous to this planet, and we've all spent more time, generations and generations more, out living on the land and doing the things that we know how to do than we probably remember. And so when we do that, it wakes up our natural innate capacities. And what my academy and my program, what I'm here to do is help people remember the innate wisdom and brilliance and healing capacity that they each have. And that a lot of times when we face the challenges, the symptoms, the pain, the suffering that comes up in life, we're running outside, right? We're running out to who can fix me, who can help me, who can tell me what's wrong. When I want to inspire people to go inside. And just like we need to have that balance between our inhale and our exhale, our sympathetic and parasympathetic, we also are often out of balance in how much attention we're giving outside versus how much attention we're bringing inside. And so if you can bring your attention inside and listen, bring yourself into, you change your breath, do some movement, things that are going to help bring those brain waves and slow them down. Alpha is about interactualizing. It's about going in and accessing the beauty, the wisdom, the intelligence, the healing that's inside of you. And just like I was saying, like when you're really skillful at asking questions, you can ask the right question and that will help someone self-reveal what's going on, like a good coach does, right? So I really feel like one of the first things we can do for one another is help bring about greater balance in our systems and help us adapt to the stress that's in our life. So we don't have to run to the next pill or the next treatment. Instead, we can, okay, wait, my body must be stuck in a state that's out of balance. And what if we could facilitate you coming back into balance and then see what happens after your body stabilizes in balance for a while? What happens? What starts to change so that people can feel more empowered? They can feel like they have greater agency and governance over their own health, and they're not just victims, right?
Good. And that's the hope, I think, is can we as natural health care practitioners, we'll call us, is really get people to understand thousands of years ago, we're the same human being genetically. We didn't have medications. We survived. Besides the croup, which I didn't understand, which is emphysema, really. It killed a lot of people. But beyond that, I mean, really, we survived as a human being, as a Homo sapien for so long. Let's get back to what made us that way, mental, physical, everything, so then our body can work that alpha state all the time.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we say in Alpha Biotics is the biggest problem modern humans face is that we are not well adapted to modern stress. We can be, though. So of course, like we can't just call in an archaic revival and get rid of all of this tech. It's probably not going anywhere. So what we need to do is figure out how to adapt better to it. And it starts with our connecting to those vital forces, balance in the brain and nervous system, and learning to perceive with that more human part of our brain to see the whole picture, because that's the key to getting out of those symptoms and other challenges of imbalance that we get ourselves into.
You know your stuff, Jeffrey. We're like exactly on the same page.
Yeah, I can tell for sure.
Well, quick smile for 5 seconds for a thumbnail.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're good. This is all the show. I'm going to cut to the back room. Thank you guys for watching for 1, 2. Appreciate it on my Facebook, on YouTube also. And Jeffrey, say 1 second, guys.
Yeah. I would